Hello, my name is Patrick Cleath, and for my presentation, I chose to recount the events leading up to what is considered a humanitarian crisis by many, the Australian Detention Centre in Nauru. In order to put the crisis into context, we need to understand how Nauru entered the world economy. So, not much information is available about Nauru's history before European contact. In 1798, Captain John Fern encountered the people of the island for the first time, and it was noted that they had a distinct culture and language, which was assumed to be due to isolation. Later on in the 1800s, Nauru became a port for European traders who made small exchanges for food and shelter. War inside Nauru ended up threatening the stability of exchanges, so Germany included the island in their Marshall Islands Protectorate, which resulted in guns being confiscated from the islanders, and trading stability resumed. Australia occupied German forces during World War I and has had authority until 1968 when Nauru became an independent republic. And Nauru's primary source of economic growth was selling phosphate to European countries. They became one of the richest countries in the world because of that, but their supply ran out and all they had left to rely on was their investments. And the investments didn't go so well, so as a result, Nauru has been suffering economic issues. So Nauru needed to find a new source of revenue, and a recent quote from the Australian government says, "Revenue associated with the presence of the regional processing center and its ancillary service providers represent Nauru's most significant revenue stream." And what they're referring to is the center of this humanitarian crisis, the offshore detention center for those caught immigrating by boat to Australia. The ancillary service providers are people who make sure that there's electricity at the center. Essentially, the biggest stream of revenue for Nauru is their deal with Australia. And as a side note, the picture below is an example of what the land looks like after mining phosphate for so long. It's just kind of ruined the landscape. So, who is the detention center for? Circa 2000, thousands of refugees were turned away from Australia, with the government claiming that they had no obligations under international law to allow access to the country. They decided to deal with the problem by paying nearby islands, including Nauru, millions of dollars to house refugees. It's Australian policy that intercepted asylum seekers are banned from ever resettling in Australia. So they paid the islands by the amount of refugees. Nauru's initial deal was worth about 24 million and lasted from 2001 to 2008 until all refugees were processed. They reopened the detention center in 2012 and it's currently operating today. So what exactly is going on that's so bad? Well, The Guardian, an Australian publication, got access to 3 years' worth of leaked incident reports at the detention center. There are 155 cases of threatened self-harm, 90 cases of abusive or aggressive behavior, and 57 cases of assault on a minor. So around 3,000 people have been sent to the detention center since its reopening in 2012, and these were just reports up to 2015. Since then, the Refugee Council of Australia has reported in 2017 that children as young as 7 to 12 are now experiencing repeated incidents of suicide attempts, and dousing themselves in petrol, swallowing razor blades, stones, trying to overdose, hanging themselves, attempting to jump out of high places, and just many other instances that are hard to talk about. So, Medicines Sans Frontiers 2018 report noted that 30% of the asylum seekers at the detention center have attempted to commit suicide at some point. So the general consensus is that the mental health issues come from a sense of hopelessness after being in the detention center for so long. People, they're not suffering from starvation, they're fed, but they're losing hope and having a future to the point where they don't eat or do anything throughout the day. Another issue is that Nauru is incapable of providing the same level of healthcare that Australia has. The Nauruan hospital is regarded as not safe by the Australian government's health contractor, International Health and Medical Services. So oftentimes the refugees are sent to Australia to deal with medical issues. 2019 statistics show that about 1,200 people have been sent to Australia for medical care, and out of those, around 900 are still in Australia. And another problem is that mental health issues are more common in people who have been separated from their family. And Australia sometimes insists that family members don't accompany each other when some receive medical evacuations. Another humanitarian focus is the housing conditions. When the camp opened, it only housed people in tents, and it took 3 years for formal buildings to be built, but there are some that have lived in tents for up to 5 years. In 2018, it was reported that more than 300 asylum seekers, including 36 children, were still living in mold-prone tents that held serious health risks. According to The Guardian, at least a dozen former staff who have worked in the regional processing center are understood to have developed conditions from exposure to mold and breathing the contained air in buildings. With that being said, the camp became open in 2015, allowing, quote, a select number of asylum seekers access to the community 3 days a week from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And the tents were shut down in 2018 before the Pacific Island Forum, where Nauru would be hosting visitors. So a quote from a asylum seeker is that they cleaned and washed the camp in a way that you can't believe so many people have been ill, killed, tortured, humiliated in this place at all. And people who lived in the tents were moved to Australian-owned buildings on the island days before the forum. So there's not very much formal information about the relationship between Nauru's citizens and the asylum seekers, but a couple things are: the government put out a statement in 2015 saying that the government of Nauru says refugees in this country are in no physical danger, and the stories of locals attacking them are largely fabricated to further political agendas and influence the Australian government. But at the same time, under the Border Force Act, workers at detention centers risk up to 2 years in jail if they speak out about what they see at them. And Nauru has explicit laws against assembly that prohibit gatherings in groups of 3 or more, where the assembly could cause a reasonable person to fear. On top of that, it's punishable for up to 5 years in jail for disrespecting the Nauru flag, emblem, or anthem. So a little bit of progress has been made on this issue. In August 2018, a group called Kids Off Nauru was created, and since then, all of the children have left the island or have plans to leave. I think the last report was that there are 4 kids left, but they did not disclose the exact date that they were going to leave or where they would be going. That was a couple months ago. On that same token, when Prime Minister Scott Morrison took office in August 2018, there were 113 asylum seeker children on the island, and he might have had a part in that as well. But as far as asylum seekers in general, Australia still plans to continue sending all refugees who are caught migrating by boat. They'll be sent to Nauru or Papua New Guinea.